This video has been produced for the Seaview Yacht Club adult sailing course to try and remove some of the mystique and fear instilled in those who, as crew, have to handle a mermaid spinnaker for the first time. The video covers the following: preparation, hoisting the spinnaker, setting and trimming the spinnaker, jibing the spinnaker, and finally dropping the spinnaker. Usually the spinnaker will be hoisted as the boat rounds the windward mark and goes on to the run. It will have to be jibed at a wing mark or other course alteration where the stern of the boat moves through the wind, and will be dropped as the boat approaches the leeward mark. Preparation involves packing or repacking the spinnaker, getting the halyard and sheets onto the correct side of the boat for the hoist, attaching the pole onto the mast and resting the front of it on the foredeck ready for the hoist, attaching the spinnaker to the halyard, sheet and guy. The guy is the sheet on the side of the spinnaker on which the pole is to be set, and when the spinnaker is jibed, what was the guy becomes the sheet, and what was the sheet becomes the guy. Hoisting the spinnaker involves raising the pole to the horizontal, pulling up the spinnaker halyard, pulling in the guy, adjusting the sheet, and finally dropping the genoa onto the foredeck. Setting the spinnaker correctly involves keeping the spinnaker filled and playing the sheet until the windward edge of the spinnaker begins to break. This, and keeping the spinnaker pole as nearly as possible at right angles to the wind, should optimize the performance. Jibing the spinnaker involves one of the crew standing on the foredeck facing aft, lifting the jib and genoa sheets over his shoulder on the opposite side to the pole, unclipping the pole from the mast, clipping the pole onto the old sheet, which will become the new guy, unclipping the pole from the old guy, which will become the new sheet, and then finally clipping the free end of the pole onto the mast. Dropping the spinnaker involves firstly rehoisting the jib or genoa, and then all at the same time letting off the sheet and guy, letting off the halyard, grabbing the foot of the spinnaker and putting the whole sail into the cockpit, dropping the pole, and then chipping the jib or genoa as the boat comes back onto the wind. It really is as easy as that. And so what are the secrets? Firstly, obviously, you need good teamwork. Secondly, you need good preparation. And thirdly, you need good coordination by all three members of the crew. So now, with the help of Ben and Ali Few Brown and David Craven, otherwise known as Reggie, let us examine each of the stages in greater detail, during which we will probably see some of the things that can go wrong and maybe learn how best to try and avoid them.
Now we have to pack the spinnaker, and the spinnaker is triangular, so it has three sides. We need to find the head of the spinnaker, which is the end with the ring on it, and there is a red strip on one side and a blue strip on the other side, and we need to go down the line, folding it in small sections to make sure there aren't any twists in it. And keep folding until you get to the clip at the end. Now this needs to be done every time you drop the spinnaker, just to ensure there are no twists. And then holding the clip and the ring in one hand, we need to go down the blue line, doing exactly the same, folding in sections until you get to the clip. Meanwhile, the spinnaker bag is held open. It has an elastic attached to it, which attaches to a clip on the underside of the deck opposite, and that is held open so that we can put the spinnaker into the bag easily. And then once you've got the three ends, hold them in your hands tightly and stuff the rest of the spinnaker into the bag. Just make sure that you never let the three ends become unattached from each other, they will just sit on the top of the spinnaker. There we are. And then we detach the clip from the other side, and the spinnaker's ready to go up.
Here Alison is demonstrating, still on the mooring, how the spinnaker pole, the up haul and the down haul are attached, and their relationship to the jib sheets for the purposes of raising the spinnaker. Currently we have the pole on the side of the boat. She's now taken hold of the up haul and the down haul that are attached to each other. She's unattaching them. She's released the spinnaker up haul, which was slightly caught, and just yanked it down. She's now attaching that to the upper rope that is attached to the spinnaker pole. That will be what lifts the spinnaker pole up when it's attached to the mast. Now she takes the down haul, which equally has been let off, and will attach it to the other rope, making sure that she doesn't twist them or twist the pole in the process, onto the bottom rope where there is a ring or eye in the middle of it. Having done that, she's now pushing the pole forward, making sure and demonstrating it there that it goes under the jib sheets. The spinnaker pole and all its associated parts go under the jib sheets at all time. She's now attaching the pole to the guy. Here we have a diagram showing the pole attached to what it says is a spinnaker sheet, but is in fact a spinnaker guy. That goes through the eye of the spinnaker pole. She's now pushing the pole forward and attaching it to the lower ring. That will be its resting point to make sure that it interferes with no other parts while sailing. She's pulling the up haul back and just attaching it round its own cleat there, just to keep it out of the way, so that if we were sailing, the jib wouldn't catch. She's just showing there the jib sheets could then move freely back and forth across the boat. Here we have a diagram showing exactly that, with the jib sheets in bold over the spinnaker pole. You see the up haul and the down haul, and here it is from the other side. The up haul showing the lift and the down haul slack, with the jib sheets over everything else underneath. Here we have it in a real situation, sailing. We're now sailing close hauled, and Alison is preparing exactly what you've just seen on the diagram. She's now taking the up haul and the down haul. It's hard to see through her, but what she's doing, she's taking those and attaching them to the pole, and at the same time the spinnaker sheet, guy and halyard you can see on the foreground on the left where the sail will itself be attached. She's now pushing the pole forward and attaching it onto the lower ring. The spinnaker up haul still underneath the jib sheets. That is now complete, and the spinnaker is in a position ready to be hoisted at the right time. Now, here she is taking the sheet and the guy and the halyard through the same gap. It doesn't necessarily have to be that gap between the mast and the stays, although that is the one we prefer. She's bringing them all in together. If she brings them all in together at the same time, she will ensure that there are no twists. If you attach them outside and bring one side of the stay and one the other, you may find that you've gone the wrong side of the stay, and when you pull up the spinnaker, that will cause problems. She's just attached the halyard to the centre eye, which is the halyard ring. The guy is now being attached to the forward clip and the sheet to the aft clip. That is now ready to go out, and by the very fact that the three came in through the same hole, the whole sail will go out through the same hole. That is now ready to fly, and the pole is in a prepared position. So when we reach the weather mark, we will be in a position to bear away and hoist the spinnaker. The next thing to do before getting to the weather mark is to ensure the pole goes up. Here Alison is freeing off the weather jib sheet, because it's very difficult to raise the pole if you have tension on the lazy weather jib sheet. She's just going up, raising the pole up under the jib sheets, which she moves onto the upper ring. Sometimes there's a sliding track, but in this instance it's on two rings, and she's just flipped, due to the boat heeling a little bit, just flipped the pole over the side so that it doesn't go under the jib. Now you can see, even though she released the jib sheets, there was still tension on them, and she found it hard to raise the pole. She's now eased those off, and she'll give it another go on the up haul, and the pole is slowly but surely raising itself. It is now in the position that it will be set for when we raise the spinnaker. Now all there is to do is, when we bear away, is for the middleman, in this case David, to pull hard on the spinnaker halyard and raise it. Alison's there opened the bucket by attaching a bit of elastic to the far side. Her job is going to ensure that the spinnaker goes up through that gap smoothly without catching on anything, sticking to anything, or snagging. So now we will wait to bear away. At this point she's just fluffing out the spinnaker a bit so that the guy will go round. David is now bending over to get to the halyard by the looks of things. Here we go, he's pulled on the halyard, the spinnaker started to go up. I am pulling on the guy to pull it back. Alison sees it go out smoothly, back it comes on the guy, spinnaker full, tension on the sheet, and it is now full. You just saw it full there at the top of the picture, and there it is. Alison is now going to drop the jib. You would drop the jib or the genoa in this instance so as not to interfere with a clear wind into the spinnaker for maximum speed. The jib should really be dropped right down onto the deck. It's slightly up the forestay at that point, which wouldn't be very helpful. But in this instance, I don't suppose it makes a great deal of difference. But dropping it nevertheless means that you get clear wind into the spinnaker. There you see the jib sheets, the lazy jib sheets, over the whole contraction of the downhaul, the uphaul, and the spinnaker pole. Alison is now just checking it doesn't fall in the sea, so that the jib doesn't fill with water and slow us up. If it was dropped completely onto the deck, that might be a little easier. Now here she is releasing the now lured jib sheet, because she's going to go up and do a gybe. If that jib sheet is tight, it would have the same effect because it is going to end up over the spinnaker pole. So here she goes up to gybe. She's facing the mast, lifting up the jib sheets which she puts on her shoulder, unclipping the spinnaker pole off the mast, clipping it onto what was the sheet and now becomes the guy, flicked it off the other guy which has now become the sheet, and let the the jib sheets fall off the end and onto the mast. Now we slightly missed it there, so David had to give her a hand. The chances are that if that happens, it's not necessarily the fault of the person on the foredeck. It's more likely to be because the person controlling, which may be the helmsman in my case, as I always do it, and the middleman in other people's cases, controlling the sheet and the guy. Because if there's too much pressure too quickly in, it makes a mistake. Here we go the other way again, under the jib sheets, sliding it across, off goes the others, they drop to the ground, onto the mast, and at that moment the middleman whoops the boom over, and the gybe is complete. It looks like I've let the guy go a bit too much that time, and now the spinnaker is full, so not much time lost there, and she comes back into the boat. So that is the basis of jibing, everything under the jib sheets at all times. If you forget to lift up the jib sheets, you'll be in trouble. Right, having now decided to get the spinnaker down, we pull the jib up, make it up, and prepare ourselves for dropping the spinnaker, which would be when we come down to the leeward mark, presumably. Alison just tidying up there. A tidy boat means less things likely to get caught up. David has now got his hands on the sheet, which is where he pulls it in. He's pulling like mad. We've let the halyard off, we've let the guy off. The whole contraption comes through the same gap. Having got it down, he will then get onto the jib, assuming we're going onto a beat, and Alison at that stage will be dropping the pole, doing exactly the reverse of what she did in the first case. Here it is off the mast, down to the bottom ring, and attached. She will then reach forward to the now lazy spinnaker uphaul and just put it back round its own cleat to keep it out of the way of the jib while we are sailing. If you leave it out there, it can snag on the jib when you tack. So now here we are set again to sail. Now, some people pack the spinnaker every time, which is probably a good discipline. However, if the spinnaker comes down in one piece through the same gap and you have the three ends still attached, there's nothing wrong with sticking it back in the bag because you know that it hasn't got a twist. Now, if you want to then change round the sheet and the guy because you may wish to go up on another gybe on the next leg, you now can unattach the sheet and guy, attach them to each other, and the halyard and attach that to the sheet and guy, but make sure you do it all where you are, so as to avoid any twists round stays or sheets or any other thing that can get in the way. They will then be pulled out and left in a lazy position, but not twisted around anything at all. And there they are, being neatly left outside the boat, not in the way of anything at all. So now the spinnaker pole, uphaul, downhaul, are neatly stowed away, and we can beat or do anything we want without interference from them. Here we are with it being filmed from outside the boat to give a bigger perspective. Alison's now clipping on the sheet, the guy and the halyard to the spinnaker, the same sequence as you saw before. Everything coming through that gap between the mast and the stay and under the jib sheets. The spinnaker boom you can see attached to the mast under the jib sheets on the lower ring. She's now attached that. The next function before the spinnaker can go up will be to raise the pole. Now here she goes, she's letting the uphaul off its own cleat so as it will operate. She's going to raise the boom, still staying under the lazy jib sheet, which David is just freeing off, onto the upper ring. Now, because the boat is heeling over, the pole naturally has dropped down to leeward. Now, you wouldn't be able to raise it under the jib, obviously. It needs to be on the starboard side. So at this point, she will just flick it over the starboard bow so that when she hoists the uphaul, it will go up. Here we have it from the other angle, from the starboard side, exactly the same sequence. Alison going up, shaking off the jib sheet, undoing the uphaul, and raising the pole. There you can see a good shot of the jib sheets being lazy over the pole, raising the pole and flicking it over the starboard bow again. When the pole's ready to go up, she's now pulling it, and up it goes onto the forestay into the set position for when we ease off onto a reach or a run. Now, the spinnaker's attached to the sheet, guy and halyard, the pole is up, it's ready to fly. Now, if the spinnaker went into the bag wet, often it can get slightly stuck and possibly cause not a twist, but a slight knot. It's not, in fact, a knot, because the wind will blow it out. Now, here you see the spinnaker being raised, being pulled up, and there it is, a wet spinnaker, and it's got itself a bit twisted. Now, it's not a question of just pulling like crazy. A little bit of gentle tweaking with the sheet and guy should pull that out. There it goes, and we're away. Not ideal, but very little time lost. The spinnaker's now full and driving. At this stage, if we were racing, we would now be getting the jib down, dumping it on the deck. You will see there that the spinnaker pole, controlled by the uphaul, was under the jib sheets. Here we go down, David pulling like crazy, Alison just bringing down and reversing the process that she did when we raised it. Pole down onto the bottom ring and uphaul round its own cleat. The boat is now back in that position for here we are, just picking up a mooring, not too fast, head to wind, quite a windy day, and then the sails down so that there will be no pressure in them.